Okay, welcome, guys, gals, our non-binary pals. My name is Joel. I am one of your hosts for this week's episode of Buffy Boys, and with me, as always, is my faithful co-host,
Brian. Hello, how are you?
Hello. And this week on Buffy Boys, your weekly review of Buffy the Vampire Slayer from a queer, literary, and hopefully feminist perspective, we are looking at episode 18 of season 2, the improbably named Killed by Death.
So apparently the title is actually a reference to a Motorhead song, but I don't really like Motorhead, so who knows. What to say to you? It's raining here. It's actually a really nice rainy evening in Dublin, which is not too unusual, would you believe? So you might be able to hear a little bit of the rain outside, maybe a little bit of the storm. So
yes, those are not sound effects we have piped over this spooky episode. This is actual weather live as it's happening.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. Okay, so this episode is season 2, episode 18, and it was first aired on March the 3rd, 1998. It was written by Rob Deshotel and Dean Batali, who we've had quite a bit before, and it was directed by Darren Serafian. Yeah, Serafian. This is actually the only episode that he directed. Mm-hmm. He is the nephew of Robert Altman, the director of things like MASH, and the thing I always remember him for is Prairie Home Companion, which is probably not a great thing, or Shortcuts and The Player and stuff like that. So Darren Serafian spent 5 years ghost directing to start his career, which is so funny.
Ghost directing?
Yeah.
Is that a thing you can do?
Yeah, it's where you get brought in to finish up a project that a director just can't get finished, basically. So there's one called The Young Warriors, which I think might be a Warriors follow-up.
As in the cult
maybe
classic.
I didn't look into it, but that he ghost directed. He also directed 23 episodes of House, so he was big in the House world. He became an executive producer, I think, at some point. And most recently, he directed an episode of Swamp Thing, which was the recent DC TV show that ran for one season and got cancelled, like when one episode had aired or something like this.
We went to watch that, didn't we? Or try an episode of it?
We should. Apparently, it's incredibly gruesome and really inventive visually. And one of the rumors flying around as to why it was cancelled, okay, is that a lot of people said that they had filmed it in Atlanta on the basis of getting a budget and
a tax break.
Sorry, budget, tax break, and essentially Atlanta came back to them and said, "Oh yeah, the tax break we gave you, we basically moved one of the decimal points by accident and gave you multitudes more than we intended." And we will not be giving you that for season 2. So this TV show, which was going to have a small audience, was never going to warrant the budget it had and the creative flow it had.
Sure.
Very quickly became untenable, and they cancelled it immediately.
That's a shame.
Yeah. So we should watch it at some point, definitely.
It's very closely related to a property which I mentioned before, which I'm quite fond of, which is Hellblazer in the classic, Vertigo imprint comics. Vertigo should come recently.
Vertigo. Did it?
Yeah.
Is it because essentially it got subsumed by DC?
Maybe, but there was definitely some buzz about Vertigo comics being shut down, which produced a lot of adult kind of level comics, including Swamp Thing and Hellblazer. Yeah.
And Sandman.
And Sandman, of course, yeah. So a lot of good stuff in there. Yeah. And we were burned quite badly, in my opinion, with the Hellblazer television adaptation, Constantine.
And the movie.
The movie's just weird. But the fact that the Swamp Thing TV show, which is quite closely related to Hellblazer, hasn't come through is kind of unfortunate. But we will check that out.
Yeah, I was finding it funny because the adult Marvel equivalent, because I think Marvel comics are by far better than DC comics for the most part.
Yeah.
So besides Batman stuff, and the great Batman stuff is few and far between, realistically, given how much there is published on a general basis, versus the actual quality of all the Avengers, X-Men, and Spider-Man stuff. It doesn't pale in comparison, but the adult version of the of DC Marvel Universe is Marvel Max. Yeah. I don't think it exists anymore because it was so fucking bad.
It was more kind of like Skinamax kind of exploitative kind of stuff. Anyway,
really not good.
Before we get into this episode, which is a spooky episode, which spooks me out, I want to talk about Veronica Mars.
Can I do the Buffy and summary before we do that?
Yes, please do.
Okay, cool. So, hospitalized with a bad flu, Buffy has to confront her memories of a dead cousin and realizes there is a demon, their Kinder Mord, who preys on children. She deliberately makes herself ill enough to see and fight it. Angelus attacks her in the hospital and Xander confronts him.
Yeah, okay. We're going to have to lock this down, Brian.
Yeah.
It's Angelus.
Angelus. I've said it so many times wrong in the last like 3 or 4 episodes, and it's all because of your one time making a joke about it. I've said Angelus like fine for decades.
I've given you a very simple rubric. Whatever you're about to say the other one, because it's usually going to be the case. So yeah, we will definitely get into that, because I do actually find this a weirdly memorable episode. But what I do want to talk about in our court mandated banter segment is Veronica Mars.
Yeah.
Because we are watching the Veronica Mars continuation, I think it's fair to say.
It's season 4 of Veronica Mars.
Season 4 of Veronica Mars.
It came out by surprise yesterday, or maybe it was Friday. But it was supposed to be released later on in the month, and they kind of dropped it early because of San Diego Comic-Con. Incredibly exciting.
So, just the very briefest of premise, if there is anyone who hasn't watched an episode of Veronica Mars, it's I think one of our highest recommendations we can make off the back of this podcast.
No doubt.
But essentially, Kristen Bell was kind of where she got started, I think is fair to say. Or,
she did. Kristen Bell did a couple of she was Broadway kid, so she did that beforehand, but otherwise no.
Kristen Bell, who's obviously now starring in The Good Place, but is where she got started as
probably most well known for Frozen.
For Frozen, absolutely. She is a young private detective in Neptune. It's the best rendition of noir in modern day neo-noir, in my opinion. It's ahead of its time. It's complex. It deals with really, really difficult issues very well, and she's an incredible character, incredible role model.
Very well developed character. Like, I mean, she starts off, you kind of think, oh, she's like, you know, she used to be a popular kid, now she's so hardcore.
Yeah.
But they really flesh out the character in so much detail.
So
the premise just sounds so stupid. It's like, you know, private detective figuring out high school problems, and it's just it's so fucking good. She's
essentially clearly a chase. She starts off as, and then her best friend is murdered, and it all breaks back. But anyway,
Amanda Seyfried before she was famous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it is. I think it's the front runner for if we were to do a podcast after Buffy Boys, it would be about Veronica Mars, and the fact that season 4 is back is very, very exciting. So we're watching it. It's very good.
Yeah, we started watching last night, and it's good so far. It's enjoyable, and it's more of like they've slipped right back into the characters.
It needs a queer main character. I think it's that's missing in the show.
That's the huge thing. It's definitely missing any queer representation whatsoever. In the original show, I don't think there's any queer characters really at all.
No.
Maybe Mac turned out to be queer. I wouldn't be too surprised.
Sure.
But anyway, so Veronica Mars is back, and like Veronica Mars originally aired, if I remember correctly, a year after Buffy finished. So like, I mean, and like for my money's worth, it really did take up the mantle of the Buffy quality portrayal of a teenage girl in a way that no one expected to be actually good. So it's the kind of thing you disregard as kind of being like a Harriet the Spy kind of thing, and I'm sure in the same way that Buffy's premise, if you didn't know Buffy, sounds ridiculous. Actually reminds me, if someone said to me the other day that the word cliffhanger, if that wasn't a word that was in our lexicon as like something that has to be resolved, it'd be it's just such a ridiculous way to like describe what someone does when they're like climbing. True.
Like just cliffhanger. I'm a cliffhanger. Like what's that Sylvester Stallone film about the guy who climbs up cliffs? Cliffhanger. Like it sounds ridiculous.
Well, see, that's named after that. It's named Cliffhanger because there are a couple of moments where he's nearly falling off.
Oh sure, but it would be that
has a great opening scene, and the rest of the movie is pure trash.
It'd be like calling John Wick like terrorist shooter or something. You know what I mean? Like it's anyway. I went off on a tangent there.
No way related to the names of Buffy or what Buffy or thing are about.
Because my point is, like, if you didn't know what Buffy was, you would think the premise was laughable potentially. I think, So, watch Veronica Mars, big recommendation. We will talk about it more as it continues. But this week we watched, as you said, an episode where Buffy gets hospitalized. It's very much about her being stuck in this hospital with these kids. The kids can see this horrific monster. We'll have been tweeting a couple of pictures about it. It's a very Freddy Krueger-esque kind of thing, kind of pre-Slender Man vibes in some ways, kind of mouthful of this is like this tall stalking man with long fingers and a black hat and all that kind of stuff, and she can see it, and she's trying to fight it, and also dealing with I think a little conveniently the fact that she's solely remembering that her fear of hospitals comes from the fact that her cousin was killed by the same demon when she was 7. So Brian, what did you think of the episode?
It wasn't great now, in fairness. It was super creepy and really moody and well shot, actually, I thought, but just like didn't have a sense of fun to it. It's very hard to inject a sense of fun into an episode about kids getting having a demon sit in their chest and sucking their life out through his eye stalks.
Yes.
It's a hard sell.
We should mention that in the Buffy Ann summary, you quoted their kind is moored.
Their kind is moored.
Which is not what the demon is called in the episode. It's called, I think in the episode it's Das Kind ist tot.
Yeah.
Which is,
Jill speaks German.
Or it's one of these things that technically means the child death. It's not quite how a German person would necessarily articulate that, but it's not wrong.
Apparently, it might have been lifted from the phrase, the German phrase for sudden child death. Or what's that called again?
Just like the sudden infant death syndrome.
Infant death syndrome, basically. And SIDS. There we go. That's what it is. Apparently, that it was to some degree lifted from that, the German equivalent phrase.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, no, it's definitely creepy. I think that it does lift a lot from the Nightmare on Elm Street of Freddy Krueger, because we have kind of a similar frame to Freddy Krueger. We have the fact that only children can see him and engage with him. The adults aren't any help, and also it ends up with them being down in a boiler room. I was going to say boiler house, but down in a boiler room, which is very kind of strong kind of imagery from the Nightmare on Elm Street films. And there's specifically a scene as well towards the end where their kind is tot, or however they describe it and name it in the episode, is dragging his long fingers along the wall, which I would say is a specific reference to the
films, and it has like a very specifically placed shadow in that scene as well, which is important. Interestingly, okay, so the guy who plays their Kinderstrud, whose name I forgot to take down, is actually played the Shape in Halloween 2018.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and what's weird about that, okay, is apparently 2 people played the Shape in Halloween 2018. So it was the original guy who played Mike Myers. Yeah,
for the kind of the hero shocks, essentially. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, there you go. So the guy who originally played Mike Myers in 1978 or whatever it was, in Halloween, the original Halloween movie, which is an incredible watch. Go back and watch the first Halloween movie if you get a chance. He also played the Mike Myers in the new one.
Like he's an older man now, so he's not doing the same stunts.
Sure. So the other person who was playing him as well was the guy who's playing the Kinderstrud. Yeah,
and so traditionally before Nick Castle, he's the classic Michael Myers actor. So the Shape is what before we knew it was Michael Myers, that's what it was credited as originally. So it returns as the Shape. Yeah. So James Juge Courtney, who plays their King this Tut and plays the Shape. I've just checked it there. So like reasonably strong. Like I think it's one of these monsters where it gets scarier in what you don't see, because when you do actually see it, and when, it's a bit like rubbery, but there is I think there's some decent tension in not being able to see it. And I did find this episode was one that I remembered years later, just because I think the fever element adds like a weird unsettlingness to it as well. The fact that she's not quite certain what's happening, and this sense of her being infantilized to a certain degree, because she's a child. She's kind of in the child's ward almost, but yeah, it was not the strongest episode. It definitely in the most recent run of things.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh yeah, worth noting very quickly about Halloween there. There are 2 new Halloween movies with Jamie Lee Curtis have just been announced for Halloween 2019 and Halloween 2020.
Oh, very cool.
Which is really exciting. So I'm looking forward to seeing those.
So what would you say? What themes do you think we can extract from this episode? There.
Okay. So the first huge one is just childhood and fairy tales. Mm-hmm. So it may surprise you to find out that I read an article about this. So the article I read, which is actually really, really good, it's very short, it's maybe 8 pages long, so definitely very consumable, is Whose Side Are You On Anyway? Children, Adults, and the Use of Fairy Tales in Buffy by Sarah E. Squire. And it's really interesting spelling of Squire, Skwire, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so basically what she talks about is the kind of didacticism in general fairy tales. It's about, being stories being passed on from adults to children, giving them lessons and what they can learn about XYZ thing. So, it's about don't follow adults into the woods.
Yeah.
Don't...
Like, say, with, Jack and the Beanstalk, about kind of, don't be foolish, and kind of all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, what's didacticism? Didacticism being when you are teaching a lesson through storytelling. Mm-hmm. And she notes that what happens in Buffy is actually a reversal of the didacticism in fairy tales when fairy tales are used. And she highlights 3 specific episodes while talking about this. She highlights this episode, Killed by Death, she highlights Gingerbread, which is the episode
Hansel
with
and Gretel.
Hansel and Gretel
Yeah, I was gonna
episode
mention that,
in season 3. And then she also highlights Hush.
Sure, yeah.
So for the first two, she identifies basically a situation where you're dealing with the foolish adults and the wise children. So the wise children can see the truth, and they're trying to relay this information to adults, and they won't believe them, essentially. So in this episode, and I'll get into that generally. And then she also talks at length about Hush and about how Hush represents an odd interstitial space because it's Buffy more readily transitioned into adulthood. She no longer exists in a childhood space and all that stuff. So that's cool. What you have to look at in this episode is that the foolish adults are represented by both Buffy's friends, who are kind of doubting her and not totally believing, because Cordelia very explicitly doesn't believe Buffy that there is this thing walking through the halls, that she's just in a feverish state. And Giles specifically doesn't think that there's anything happening here and says that essentially what's happening here is that Buffy has made up a demon so that she can actually fight it, because the only things she can't fight are death and disease, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's a useful interpretation, in the sense that Joyce has already introduced into the episode that Buffy is sick because of the recent issues with Jenny Calendar.
Yeah.
So that Buffy has been weakened, put into a weakened state by the whole death of Jenny, and
she's stressed. She's physically exhausted by the whole thing. Yeah.
Exactly. The thing is about Buffy is that instead of it being that the monster symbolizes something, and it certainly does, it symbolizes Buffy's fear of death and Buffy's past trauma and her inability to fight something. It also is there, and that's a really important element of Buffy, is that the thing that you're afraid of, it's there, it exists in the world, and that's the first thing we need to deal with. So that's really cool. It also just it's an important aspect in terms of just the whole movement in Buffy is the moving into adulthood. It represents Buffy represents the Buffy series represents that whole transition. And in this episode, she's kind of to some degree taught the worth in seeing the child's perspective and importance in believing the children around her. Yeah. And I'm not sure what I'm trying to say about that, but it's cool.
I kind of have I don't know if I fell on a really table pounding kind of certainty on how I wanted them to interpret this, but very much the central thing is, as Cordelia says, she has a great line where she's very blunt and says, are you sure that there's actually a demon and you're not just not able to do what's happening? Imagining a demon that you can kill with your fists because your cousin died when you were a kid in your fave hospitals. And everyone kind of comes down on her for being tactless, and she says, tact is just not saying true stuff, I'll pass.
Which is very, very connected to her namesake Cordelia from King Lear.
Sure, and I was also going to say it's very, very you.
Thanks.
A great phrase which I've never heard used before in any other context. Giles describes her as Homerically insensitive. But it's astute, and I think it's very important how you construct that, because I think there's a different version of this episode which potentially could have been better, where that red herring of who the monster is and what the monster is kind of continues the whole way, and the sting at the end is there never was a monster, and that's one way you can approach that as well. But as you said, Buffy almost always does have something to fight, and she specifically articulates to the young boy who kind of acts as her guide in this situation, Ryan.
Yeah. Who I looked up on Instagram, and he does exist. He has a medium-sized popular YouTube channel.
Not off the back of this, presumably.
I'd not think so.
Yeah. But she says to him, monsters are real, but also are heroes who fight them. And there is always a certain black and whiteness to the way Buffy interacts with the world that can both help and hinder her. And I think, yes, it would have been a different episode if it actually was. You could have a lot of the same elements, but it would turn out that she actually was just railing against something that wasn't there. This kid, Ryan, who appears in her doorway and kind of leads her towards the monsters, I found was very reminiscent of Billy.
Oh, no doubt, yeah. From Nightmares in season 1.
From Nightmares, yeah, when he's hospital bound, and he's, if our long-standing listeners recall, that he was imagining a nightmare world into existence because he was being attacked by his coach. So yeah, I thought he was very similar as a narrative device to that.
No doubt. Can I drop a couple of good quotes from this essay on you?
Drop them, Brian.
Great. Okay. So, while the traditional fairy tale literalizes the figurative so that the reader may have the cathartic experience of finding the figurative meaning of the tale and thereby understanding its true message, Buffy insists on the literal truth of the tale as it stands. Demons are demons. They may also stand for childhood fears or teenage angst or any number of things, but they are first, foremost, and always demons. That's awesome. That's a great little quote, I think.
Yeah, I think it might be something worth bearing in mind as we get further into Buffy, is that there's a certain central premise that, you know, both things can be literal threats and also metaphorical threats, but they often are literally there, you know. And
the literalness has to be dealt with first, I think, which is important.
Yeah, there's a present mindedness to it. I'm just noticing how interesting what, you know, the flashback scenes we have of Buffy as a little girl. That actress's character was credited as Little Buffy.
Yeah, I saw that too.
But I find that very strange, because that specifically, and I don't think the narrative questions whether or not Buffy's right in her assertion that what she saw when her cousin died screaming was actually this demon at the time. Like, that wasn't in Sunnydale, that was wherever else she used to live in California. So like, it's a rare example of a very specific supernatural thing you're seeing that happened elsewhere.
It's actually a weakness, I think. I think it doesn't feel true. It doesn't feel true that if the suggestion was that this is a multitude of demons or a race of demons and this is the kind of thing that they do, and it happens often, I'd believe it. But they don't really suggest that. They kind of just say that, like, this is the demon and he has done this. Yeah,
but even so we understand that this is a supernatural world, you know, and by no means are these creatures contained to the Hellmouth. That read to me a little like, in the moment, forgetting that Buffy had moved here from somewhere else to a certain degree, which I did think was odd. But yeah, we have a lot of. I don't want to be overly. I think our listeners will be interested one day in realizing that if you pull back the veil, part the kimono on this, that while this might be a lean 45 minutes in your podcatcher, it's an hour and a half, and we just edit out every time Brian sneezes due to his horrific hay fever.
Okay, so I'll drop one more quote and then I'll leave it at that, okay? So, here we go. Once again, it is the proper understanding of how to read a fairy tale that has delineated the difference between adults and children. Once again, it is the ability to read a fairy tale as truth, to see the very real demons that hide behind the guise of figurative, psychologizing reading of a tale that has distinguished the wise from the foolish. I think that's actually quite interesting, just in terms of, like, looking at Buffy generally, is, you know, looking at the mythologizing the psychologizing behind these things, and people like tend to read something as being just having a pure psychological basis for itself, and rarely look at the actual thing that's in front of it. Specifically in terms of Buffy studies, so it's something that we should keep an eye on anyway.
Yeah, and another related relevant thing that Giles says is when they're quite skeptical that there is a demon, there's what turned out to be a number of red herrings to do with the doctor in the hospital who's treating them, and Giles says, you know, well, maybe there isn't a literal demon. Sometimes children can see our true faces, the monsters that people can be. Maybe it's a person they're afraid of. I was like, no, it's actually a scary monster man with loads of teeth.
Yeah, and that leads them to think that it's basically the doctor who's like apparently doing like really good work and trying to help these children get better, essentially.
Yeah, and it's a weird one because they overhear him arguing with another doctor. I don't think she's a nurse, about his experimental treatments. And when they look him up, it's that he's like a malpractice suit. He's being criticized by the board for dangerous and experimental treatments. And then eventually, when he gets attacked by their kind of stuff and is killed, Buffy's like, no, he was clean. He actually was trying to help them. It's like, yeah, but he also still did all that malpractice stuff. Like evidence is still very much there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth noting that like one of the doctors, the lady doctor, is a black woman, and that's just unfortunately very rare. Buffy seeing black additional characters at all.
To be honest, yeah, and
she was nice. She had a real presence.
She was very much part of the episode, and she actually was just very nice and did nothing strange. So it was strong in that respect. There's also a whole thing with a creepy security guard who Cordelia tries to seduce at one point, and made me think, like, in American shows, when people are flirting and trying to distract people, like, it's never with a light touch. Like, she was literally groping this guy. Yeah, that's how it ends up being portrayed. But there's a whole thing where he says, like, Dr. Backer is a good man. He knows sometimes children die, and then it's like a real creepy like look to him. And his whole storyline was completely trails out. It's not even like a red herring that turns out to be like not true. It just kind of just doesn't return after he's in the first couple of scenes.
Yeah, that actor played Stanley in it's not 6 Feet Under, Sex and the City for years. He was like Carrie Bradshaw's gay best friend, essentially.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
He's the main character or not main character, but recurring significant character in Stargate SG-1 as well.
Yeah, very good. But yeah, definitely like a theme of red herrings in this episode, no doubt. Red herring is such a... I'll never... Okay, my constant remembering of what a red herring is because I watched an episode of like Young Scooby-Doo when I was younger. And it was like all the Scooby-Doo guys when they're like children basically and they're out solving crimes. But there's a character called Red Herring.
Okay.
And he has red hair and they're always blaming him for things. And he's like, it wasn't me. Leave me alone. Stop blaming me.
That's a good joke. I have a vague memory of that version of Scooby-Doo actually being weirdly like self-aware and funny and all that kind of stuff.
One of the weird elements of this episode is that Angel appears in it, really unnecessarily. So in the opening scene, he's there fighting Buffy and he basically makes her she's already quite weak and sick and he nearly gets to kill her essentially, but her friends do jump in and kill him in the end. Sorry, not kill him. Vanquish him in the end. Yeah,
this season played out completely differently. Remember that bit in season 2 where Cordelia stakes Angel and he's dead?
Yeah, Buffy does do very good makes a good effort to like actually kill Angel in this sequence though.
And we'll kill his stunt double because it was very obviously not Dave Boreanaz in this scene. But yeah, it's it's necessary. I understand. We discussed this, that they want Angel to be, they obviously want Angel to turn and then disappear for 6 episodes and come back as the big bad. He's kind of appearing in the background of these episodes and he comes to the hospital to trade barbs with, Xander.
And he brings more roses, which is important.
More roses. But it almost verges on, I think, depowering him to a certain degree when he has so many encounters where he's like, oh, you dastardly kids, I'll get you next time. Like, particularly that scene with Xander in the hospital where Xander squares up to him and Angel's like, oh, I can get past if I want to, and Xander's like, well, I'd like to see you try, etc. Like, that has a bit of power creep to it because I think they do almost portray Angel as dangerous but like defeatable in the same way that occasionally the Scoobies have overpowered a vampire, whereas generally how you would see of Angel now is that if he wanted to move through 20 people, he could just cut them down. Yeah, it's
true. One of the things I read about this episode, apparently it was actually written or originally conceived of as a season 1 episode, and I totally believe it.
Yeah, it feels like it.
It does.
And I think with the appearance of the Sunnydale Hospital, which is like a very early setting for things, and also the hospital in general, like they don't make any effort to not make it look like they're trying to make it look like an insane asylum from 1954. Like there's a look of like copper tubes and old rickety beds. It's not just
weirdly marked walls and stuff.
It's not just like modern, like run down.
I can't remember. I don't know if it's in any way similar to how the hospital's portrayed in season 5, because season 5 has a lot of hospital.
We'll keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, we should.
Buffy, while she's delirious from the fever, has a line which really spoke to me, which was, "My bed is better than any bed that's not my bed." Yeah. Which is like a truism. Yeah.
Did you notice how much shaky cam was used in her like delirious state? There's lots of like handheld camera shots, which was unnecessary and funny.
There's also quite a funny scene where she's deliriously shouting at Giles, "I need to kill the vampires," while the doctors and Joyce are listening, and Giles is like, yes Buffy, very good, we will kill those vampires. Very good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. She also has a really good line where she says, they're all talking and she says, "Shh, hospital zone, no singing."
I think just a weird little note as well was specifically the music in her creepy flashback to when she was a kid is the music from the menus of the DVD box set
which we often leave on for like too long, so we're weirdly familiar with.
It did give me a Pavlovian feeling of like, I need to turn this off.
Yeah, exactly. The episode was actually quite good in terms of, I thought, the Joyce appearances.
Yeah,
Joyce is
just a good parent.
She's a good parent. Yeah. She's nice. She must have been fucking bankrupted though, because Buffy elects to stay an extra night in the hospital, and in America that'll cost you somewhere in the region of $9 million, and your insurance won't cover it if you have insurance. So.
Yeah, it was it's definitely in the region of thousands. Like, she's getting medication and all this kind of stuff.
I actually don't know what the hospital situation was like in America in the 90s.
True.
So hard to say. And then the most important Joyce scene, of course, being the last scene in the episode, which is by far my favorite scene of the episode, which is where Buffy, Willow, and Xander are all lying in bed and eating snacks, and
If Giles was there again, that would change the tenor of that sleepover.
Joyce is like waiting on them hand and foot, and it's just really nice and funny, and like Willow and Xander being like weirdly overly comfortable and being like, oh, can I have a refill on my drink and more snacks, please?
Yeah, Xander asking for more cheesy chips when he literally has half a bag poured down the front of his shirt.
Yeah.
It actually was very reminiscent of, which I mentioned before, and I've tweeted some pictures of it, of that kind of Buffy Kig's book, like sleepover vibe. And we've mentioned there's actually few and far between, unfortunately, scenes of them actually just hanging out and having
being kids,
being kids. Yeah, but yeah, like Joyce gives good parent in this episode. It's not just playing a character. She's very maternal. She's very, it's authentic. I think it's definitely one of the strongest parts of the episode is that characterization for just wanting to take care of her dogger and not being too heavy-handed about it. And and there's a very sad scene where she just genuinely, just very politely, just says to Giles, "I'm sorry to hear about Miss Calendar." Yeah, he's like, obviously it's too painful for him to talk about, but it was a nice inclusion, I thought.
Well, Joyce and Anthony Stewart Head and Christine Sutherland have great chemistry.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously that becomes capitalized on.
I was trying to decide at various points, was it like, more of a Willow episode or a Xander episode at various points, and I really do think, I think the producers are overusing Xander at this point. I think they think he's quite funny and very liked, and maybe he was, but
everyone's waiting for that great Xander line.
Oof. But I thought Willow had some great moments in the episode. At one point she does that thing again where she's on the phone to Giles, and Giles is telling them about what the Kinderstunt is. Das Kinderstunt? Their Kinderstunt? Anyway,
they're in this, yeah.
Buffy realizes that it's what killed her cousin in a really horrifying flashback where she walks in on her cousin and sees her just screaming in terror and like writhing around because Buffy can't see it. I'm not sure why Buffy couldn't see it, to be honest.
I can actually just mention that very quickly. It is a weird thing that's not 100% clear, because it's not just being a child, it's being a child and close to death, because Buffy has to get sick to see it again.
Yeah,
it's a weird one. Yeah.
So it's a really horrifying scene, but Giles tells her this, and Buffy gets I'm going to say triggered, which I actually think is appropriate in this context. Yeah. I really don't want to use the word triggered in a disrespectful context, because I think it's also shitty thing to do.
It's often overused in an accurate context, but this is textbook triggering.
Yeah, like it's a
trigger for her.
It's a trigger of a post-traumatic or a traumatic moment.
Yeah.
Anyway, and she gets triggered by this, and Willow's just like, Giles, bye. Which is, I don't know, it's a thing that Willow does, which is when Buffy needs help, she tends to be rude to the people around her.
Yeah.
Which is actually just very caring and nice. But yeah, and there was a strong Xander moment where he stood up to Angel, which was good. But then he is horrible to Cordelia. So, because basically he and Cordelia are going to try to find information about this doctor. And they try to distract the security guard, as you were talking about earlier. And what happens is that Cordelia flirts with him, which presumably was the plan.
Yeah.
And when she stops doing that, Xander's like, yeah, what the fuck, Cordelia? How dare you be so, awful? And it's kind of, slightly slut-shamey. And then she's just like, well, stop being in love with Buffy, you fucking freak.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it was something she did. It was a spur of the moment thing because the security guard turned up. But, she did a good job, and they got what they needed and all that. I wonder sometimes if Xander standing up to Angel, Xander probably also thinks he could take a point off Serena Williams.
Oh, God, he so fucking does.
And actually about that scene where they find their kind of stuff when they read their books and do their book learning, which is one of my favourite things in Buffy when they're doing the research.
Yeah, sure.
I love Cordy being Giles' research assistant. Giles been saying, why am I stuck with her? But her just asking loads of questions, which is played for laughs because she's like, what does this demon do? What does this demon do? But that kind of bears out when she goes on to being Angel Investigations. She's just very inquisitive and asks obvious questions. But the book, the illustration she's looking at in the book, and where she closes the cover and realizes the picture on the cover is their kind of stuff. The illustration is of the demon that Sid, the mannequin, in season 1, the demons he was hunting. So I think we can infer it's the same book essentially.
That's cool,
textually, which is kind of cool. One thing that Buffy says in relation to Angel, though, which is quite dark but not inaccurate, is she says, I wish Angel had put me in the hospital sooner. Which is really, I think, feeding into this like thematic thing of like, abusive ex, and
sure.
Yeah, she says that, and she says that to herself. She's like, I never thought I'd have to say that, but it's much more of a text thing, I think, than I would have initially expected in rewatching this.
Yeah, definitely, it's quite textual. So I think that's kind of like all the kind of thematic points really of the episode, isn't it? Like, I mean, like it's a reasonably straightforward kind of episode. And I think the fairy tale stuff is the most thematically rich. But I'm like, the only thing I could think of was that the way that the monster is designed is kind of interesting in the sense that he like very much represents adulthood. He's wearing formal clothes and a top hat, which is so stereotypical.
Actually, I wouldn't agree that's a top hat. I think it's more like a bowler hat.
Yeah, bowler hat. And he's balding, which I thought was quite like interesting. Like, he has hair in the back of his head, which is quite gross.
He looks like a creepy old man that you should avoid.
He does.
Now, what do you think they're thinking this Tut is a incel? What would your perspective on that be?
He's definitely an incel, but he is definitely sucking the life out of the youth.
Yeah.
Like, and that's
actually specifically what we should note is what they distinguish that his murder method is. I'm really just wandering blind into these sentences, hoping that my words will come together. But I'm getting there in the end. No, the eye stalks are creepy, and he does this thing where his eyes open and two suckers come out, and it's quite upsetting. But he sits on their chest and pins them down, and that's actually specifically a fairy tale thing. That's something that succubuses and succubi and incubi would do. It's a thing that I think particularly in Eastern European and Slavic myth, witches would often do.
Oh.
It might specifically actually be Baba Yaga did it as well, and I think in similar mythological backgrounds, I think maybe some variety of Banshee does it as well. But the sitting on the chest thing in general, and I think particularly with children, is actually quite a strong thematic fairy tale element.
I'd have to suggest that there's some element of that is actually being spurred by people experiencing sleep paralysis, which is a thing that a lot of people experience, where they wake up from being asleep, and basically their mind wakes up and their body hasn't been sent the signal of, you don't have to lock in position anymore, because your body
mobilizes itself.
Yeah, it mobilizes itself while you're sleeping, so you don't fall off the tree or fall out of the bed, essentially. And when your brain wakes up and your body doesn't, it can be a really terrifying experience. And one of my cousins told me about, he had experienced sleep paralysis one time. What happened was he woke up, and when he was looking in front of him, he couldn't see anything, but he felt like there were 1,000 people staring on his back, and it was terrifying. They're coming to get him, essentially. But people sitting on your, feeling a great weight in your chest and feeling like you can't move is like a sleep paralysis thing. So I'd imagine that all those kind of tropes will have come from that origin. Yeah,
but 100%. And what we basically have is, if you break it down, we have a creepy old man with lanky hair who is coming into a hospital room and sitting on children's
chest. Yeah, and it's very molesty.
Yeah, and there's and the implication, I think, when they talk about the doctor as well, is like it's Morgan. He's not using it for his Frankenstein experiments. So there's just a sense of there's a sense that of adults having a duty of care with children, and it's not being maintained here.
Agreed.
And there's like a really almost aloof scene where two orderlies bring out in front of the camera a child's boggy in a boggy bag, and they're like, "Oh, the small one's always a Hargus." It's like, God, I hate Mondays when you have to bring dead children to the work. It's actually like a weirdly intense topic for an episode.
It's why I don't think it works that well.
Yeah.
Let's do a couple of Buffy bits. This episode brings back Willa's fear of frogs. It's been mentioned before, so that's good. There's a Seven Seal reference where Xander talks about not sitting down with death to play chess.
Because they suggest that basically the Tinker's thought is death.
Which is an Ingmar Bergman movie, and I've actually watched it, and it's good.
Listeners may also remember it as a key element in The Last Action Hero, the Arnold Schwarzenegger film.
Will they, or will they remember it as a key part of Bill and Ted, Joel?
Both.
Is it in Last Action Hero?
Yeah, because Ian McKellen comes out of the screen as Death and so walks around and is like, so it's both. I
haven't seen The Last Action Hero in a long time.
Yeah, but specifically,
Xander makes a reference to The Invisible Man, where he says, if I can see a floating pipe and smoking jacket, then I have it, which is a reference to the classic Invisible Man
image,
movie, and presumably not a reference to the Kevin Bacon movie of the same name.
Hollow Man. That was Hollow Man.
Was it the Hollow Man?
It was Hollow Man, yeah.
Oh.
But it's the same basic out of
It
copyright
was
idea.
horrifying.
I
It
think
really incredibly gruesome.
I think I only saw bits and pieces of it, but I remember when I was a kid. But I remember specifically that he like was washing a woman on the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah, scalpel.
I think one of the most important lines that we can take away from this episode is where Giles and Cordelia are researching, and she keeps asking about different demons, and she's like, "What's that one do?" And he's like, "Well, it unhinges its jaws and opens it wide enough to fit its entire victim's head into its mouth, and removing it with its insiders." And she's like, "Oh wow, what's that one do?" And she keeps asking this, and eventually says, "Well, that one just asks inane questions repeatedly so that no one can ever get any work done." And Cordelia says, "Boy, there's really a demon for everything." And I think,
Cordelia's bulletproof.
she's bulletproof, and she's like, she stands outside the narrative, because that is Buffy. Boy, there's a demon for everything.
Yeah, it's quite hard to offend Cordelia in some ways, and I don't think it will go down in the canon of Buffy's greatest puns when she killed a demon, where she said, with a straight face, "You make me sick," as she murdered their Kindescut.
Especially given that she made herself
sick.
Exactly.
She, there's a whole confusing bit of science where they're trying to inoculate. They think that the doctors are trying to inoculate the kids with the virus that they already have, which is kind of how like basically vaccination works. But you can't inoculate someone against something that they already have. I'm pretty certain.
Sure, it's well, I think you're right. I think it's more of a reference to like essentially the flu shot, which is a small dose of influenza.
But I haven't looked this up. I'm pretty certain inoculation is something that has to happen before you're infected with something. But anyway, she goes to drink this solution to make herself sick, and Willow's like, "This is 100% pure. You will die instantly. You need a single drop of this to be this good."
Yeah,
that's why you keep that Velma around in the party. Yeah,
it's true. When Buffy gets admitted to hospital, they say that her pupils are unresponsive, and I was like, because pupils being unresponsive means that you've just had a stroke or you're close to death. Essentially, you've had extreme brain damage. That is one of the most basic functions that your body does, is pupils dilating in response to light. And if your pupils aren't dilating, you are fucked. You are most likely have extreme brain trauma. So fashion notes. At one point, Willow is wearing red tights, like really. I was gonna say opaque. I don't mean opaque, do I? Really. Well, what's the opposite of opaque?
Transparent.
Oh wait, opaque. Opaque is not seeable, throughable. Yeah. Okay, really opaque, red tights and red shoes, and I loved it. It was wonderful. Xander's wearing like horrifying tartan golfer pants at one point.
Yes,
horrifying.
He's often dressed like he's in pajamas, and Joyce is just wearing a lot of big jewelry necklaces, a lot of that. She's very flowy. She's
very Diane Lockhart necklaces.
Actually, similarly, the doctor, I'm pretty certain she's a doctor. I'm going to say she's a doctor. The doctor who was taking to Buffy similarly had Diane Lockhart like
earrings,
like an art installation on her ear, essentially, like enormous, which I can't imagine was practical in a hospital setting. And obviously their Kindescut black, great for every season. The Tim Cook look. Is that who I mean? Tim Cook?
Tim Cook, yeah, sure.
Yeah, from Apple.
Yeah,
the Apple guy.
Yeah.
Iconic. Angel wears it all the time. Maybe this is like, in the biography of the Kindescut's life, it's a real person, and then Dave Boreanaz playing him in the film.
What's our death count for the episode, Joel?
I think it was actually reasonably bad.
Yeah,
bad
quite
deaths.
a lot, right? Like for an episode with a lot of children, there's a lot of deaths.
Yeah, so there's Stanley Backer, who's the doctor, is killed by their Kindescut, and that's
quite gruesomely.
Yeah, it's like it's invisible rips opening him in front of the children, and then blood spattering on the wall. There's Buffy's cousin Celia, and like whose child? Do you know what I mean? Like they don't get a lot of references to aunts and uncles, but she's killed in a flashback by their Kindescut. Tina, who's the tiny body bag that's wheeled out, is a kid that's killed off screen, and the Kindescut has his neck snapped by Buffy.
Sure does.
And as we established, doesn't become visible because Xander still can't see it, so they just leave that body to rot, presumably in the basement of the hospital.
That's gonna leave a smell.
4 deaths.
Wow.
But this is definitely in that canon, along with or in that rogues gallery, I think I should say more, along with Hush and things like that. That's drawn specifically from Joss Whedon's childhood nightmares. Like this is all the best monsters in genre TV shows are those fears we have that are communicated well on screen. And whether this does that well or not, but it has that vibe, definitely. Yeah.
Agreed. Okay, what's your rating, Joe?
I would probably give this episode a 4.9 cheesy chips.
Oh, wow, okay. That's really low. That's the lowest you've ever given any episode. Is this the worst episode so far?
I'm not sure how our rating system works in terms of longitudinal reviews.
It's hard to rate this episode given the context. I mean, the previous episode was passion, and the next episode is I Only Have Eyes for You classics.
Like I'll tell you why I rate from the heart, Brian. But why I rate it low compared to other Monster Week episodes we watched is, as you highlighted, it's not fun.
Yeah,
like
it wasn't enjoyable to watch.
I enjoy watching it with you. It wasn't an enjoyable episode to watch, and it didn't hold up as well as I would have liked to have done, because I do remember this has been a creepy, and I think this might have just been more creepy to me when I was younger.
Fair.
But like, I enjoyed it. There's interesting stuff to take out of it, some good lines, but it wasn't fun. It was a bit laboured, so it just dipped it just under, like for content alone, it's in the 5 range, and the lack of fun just brought it down for me. Okay, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a 6.0. I'm going to give it a 6.0 hospital zones no singings out of 10.
These are getting more esoteric as we go on.
Yeah. I think the reason, I in terms of enjoyment, probably 4.9 or so. I think that the writing in terms of how it portrays its fairy tale stuff and its adult versus children kind of issues and its inversion of the fairy tale mode is just interesting, and I was just like, that kind of caught my attention, and it interested me, so I gave it a bit of a boost.
Give you a zing.
I can't even remember what I rated it now. 6.0.
Yeah.
It gets a numbered point for that, I think.
Okay, great. Number 6.0, a bullet. So we are complete, I believe.
Done. Yes.
What are we watching next week?
We're watching I Only Have Eyes for You, I think is the name of the episode. I keep forgetting to look up the name of it.
I Only Have Eyes for You. You're correct, and this is the.
It's the ghosts, the poltergeists in the high school.
They're poltergeists.
It's been a while since there's been a threat at the high school episode.
Yeah. Where's Snyder?
Where is Snyder? I think he's in the next episode.
Yeah,
I'm excited for it.
So thanks very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Go ahead and watch I Only Have Eyes for You to get ready for next week's episode. Please follow us on Twitter. Tell your friends, tell your morgue attendants to follow Buffy Boys, and we will see you next week with another episode of this again, us talking and you listening. Thanks very much.
Wow.
Yeah.
Buffy Boys.
Buffy Boys.
See yous.